Late spring in Pennsylvania is sometimes hard to predict. April this year was unusually rainy and warm. I usually have to mow the lawn for the first time in early to mid-May, but not this year. At least it's not snowing. Last year at this time we had a snowstorm that dumped 6 inches. I guess having to mow the lawn early is worth the cost of avoiding snow. And with tax season already over, it was great to be outside in the sunshine. My house has an interesting feature. The backyard slopes downward a lot, leading to a small creek and woods behind us. When the house was built, the front of the house was leveled off the road using backfill. This meant a sharp slope about halfway down the side of the house. Thus, the basement, which was completely enclosed in the front, ended up open in the back. This allowed me to install a bifold service door so I could get the lawnmower and other lawn stuff in there, rather than cluttering up the garage. It was one of my favorite features of the house. I finished with the mower and everything fell into place. I'm allergic to grass, so I couldn't wait to go upstairs and take a shower. I was just about to get to the stairs when I heard my wife's voice. I had seen her friend's car when I was cutting the grass in front of the house, so I wasn't surprised to hear voices. But then I heard what was being said, and it made my hand pause as I reached for the doorknob. I should probably start by introducing myself. My name is Robert Crane. I preferred to go by the name Bob, but in high school they started calling me Hogan, in honor of the actor Robert Crane, who played the lead role in Hogan's Heroes. I didn't mind, but the show was taken off the air before I was born and is no longer considered a pop culture reference. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with an accounting degree, still bearing the last name Hogan. I earned my CPA degree in minimal time after graduation and now work for a large firm in Philadelphia as a team leader doing audits and the like. It's not the most exciting position, but it pays very well, and I've been able to see the inner workings of many companies. I have a special gift for forensic analytics, building financial trails to investigate things like fraud and money laundering. I'm starting to be seen as an expert and have even been asked to advise the FBI on 2 cases. My wife, Kelly, was double majoring in political science and business with plans to pursue a law degree when we met at the beginning of freshman year. I was sitting waiting for the first day of class when she walked in. Kelly had a tall, slender figure like a ballerina, only with slightly larger breasts. Her long strawberry blonde hair was scattered over her bare shoulders, presenting a beautiful vision. She wore a beautiful sundress with sandals that emphasized her delightful legs, smooth and supple. The mixture of innocence and sexuality was too much. I was seized with instant lust. Unfortunately, Kelly wasn't sitting next to me, nor was she assigned to me in a group project. It took me 4 weeks to approach her and melt the ice. I made a silly joke and she laughed. It wasn't a graceful giggle, but a full-blown laugh. We started talking, and I asked if she wanted to grab coffee after class. "I've been waiting 4 weeks for your question," she replied with a smile. For the last 2 years of college, we were rarely apart. Our parents weren't too pleased, but for our senior year, we moved to live together. But they saw how devoted we were to each other and soon got over it. I didn't see how it could get any better, but it happened. I graduated and immediately got a job at one of the big accounting firms in Philadelphia. I was making stupid money for a recently graduated 22-year-old. Kelly was accepted to the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and we stayed living in our student apartment. My company offered to pay for my MBA, so I took classes too. I rode SEPTA to work every day, so I didn't need a car, and that kept costs down. 3 years later, Kelly graduated, and I proposed to her during a celebratory dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. 6 months later, we were married. Kelly got a job as a deputy district attorney in the Bucks County Prosecutor's Office, which is north of Philadelphia. We decided to buy a house in Doylestown, which was the county seat and where the courthouse was located. The regional railroad line ended there, so I was able to take the train to work every day. It was an 80-minute drive one way, but it was better than taking the Schuylkill Expressway, aka the Schuylkill Expressway, or I-95. Kelly and her mother found a house. It was a great starter home with 3 bedrooms. One of the bedrooms was set up as an office with 2 desks. I would work from home occasionally, and Kelly needed her own space for legal work. Another bedroom would be a guest room, and of course the last room was the master bedroom. Plus, it was close to her parents' house. Kelly convinced me that it would be a built-in nanny when we had kids. I was an only child and had always wanted siblings. Kelly and I had discussed kids back in freshman year and decided to wait until Kelly was settled in her career before we started trying. But now we had reached that point, and 2 nights ago we agreed to stop taking Kelly's birth control and start trying for a baby. I was happier than I had ever been before. And then what I heard made my hand linger on the doorknob. "Hogan and I have decided it's time for me to get pregnant," excitedly announced Kelly. This excited her friend Olivia Watkins. Both women made the same high-pitched sound that made me think of whales accidentally beaching themselves on the Jersey Shore and trying to reach them. Standing on the stairs, I grinned at their excitement, which matched my own at becoming a father. I reached for the pen again when I heard a question that wiped the smirk off my face and the happiness out of myself. "That's wonderful, Kel," said Olivia. "But what are you going to do about Paul?" "Paul." "Shh," Kelly pulled her friend against her. "Hogan's outside mowing the lawn." There was a pause, and I saw her looking around, waiting for me to appear. Then she spoke again. "I'd already told Paul I was ending the affair. He was fine with it. With Grossman stepping down from his Senate seat, Paul thinks he has a real chance. Getting caught having an affair with a married staffer would be very ugly." So simple. 3 sentences shattered my world. Paul Evans was Kelly's boss in the DA's office. He was a widower in his early 40s. His wife Anne had died of breast cancer, leaving him a single father to their daughter Barbara. Paul was a real political animal, and Kelly enjoyed telling me stories about his maneuverings in his party to run for higher office. I guess I just found out how my wife had access to all this underground information. "Really?" said Olivia. "Just going cold turkey? You've been hot and heavy for 6 months, and you're just going to give up on a muffin stud?" The teasing doubt in her voice made me want to rip Olivia's head off. She was a classmate at Penn, and I knew her before Kelly. I knew Kelly and Olivia were best friends now, but I always assumed she was my friend too. Guess I was wrong. "Stop it!" Kelly protested, giggling. "You're so bad." "Paul is a wonderful lover, but it was just rude to play with him. I love Hogan, but Paul just took me and used me however he wanted. There was no love in it, just raw sex and power. Now that Bob and I are going to have a baby, I don't want to take any chances. I love Hogan, and I will be a good and faithful mother." How many more cliches are we going to breed here? I wondered. All that's left is to get home, find an unfamiliar car in the driveway, and find them having sex in my bed, and it will be complete. I wanted to run into the room and scream. I wanted to trash the room, but my muscles were restrained by paralysis. I was so stunned that I couldn't move. My heart was pounding in my ears. "So, cold turkey?" asked Olivia. Kelly giggled again. "Well, not really," she admitted. "I have a conference with Paul in Pittsburgh next week. We'll have our goodbye sex there. I'll miss the sex, but Hogan and the baby are more important." I couldn't take it anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I love Kelly, but it was killing me. At that point, I started looking into the business. I needed to step back and think. I needed to plan. I started stomping up the steps as if I were climbing a ladder. Then I opened the door and walked into the kitchen. Kelly and Olivia were sitting there with cups of tea in front of them. Was that a hint of guilt I saw on Kelly's face? "Honey, are you okay?" she asked in a concerned voice. I realized that tears were streaming down my cheeks. "Allergies," I hummed. "It's going to be a bad spring." "Well, go upstairs and take a shower. Just drop those clothes by the bathroom and I'll wash them right away so they don't contaminate your closet. I bought you a new pack of Claritin D last week that's in the medicine cabinet." "Thanks," I managed to say, heading for the stairs. I needed time to think. The next morning was Monday, and I used the excuse of an early meeting to get up and out of the house before Kelly got out of bed. The night before, I had used my allergies as a reason to go to bed early because my emotions were running high. Sitting on the train, I thought again about what I had heard. On one hand, my wife was unfaithful, but it ended up being purely sexual to stay with me and bear me a child. Some would say I should leave it at that and be happy that my wife is back in the marriage, planning to be a good wife and mother. However, there is a voice in my head that says that if she did it once, what's to stop her from doing it again in the future? 10 years from now, when the kids are in school, won't she have another just sexy affair? Then there's the divorce with the kids, in which Kelly will likely get the kids, and I'll get a hefty alimony and maintenance bill. Being an accountant and business analyst, I had to think in terms of risk and reward. I found myself doing the same thing here. It came down to the fact that my trust in my wife was completely shattered. The just sex excuse overlooks what's really important in these cases. It is a complete lack of respect for the partner. The cheater knows they are doing wrong and hurting the other person. Otherwise, they would be doing it openly, and I would have known about it from the beginning. Don't get me wrong, I don't think I would have ever put up with her sleeping with Dawn. But at least if she had talked to me about it, some respect would have been shown. Kelly's action proved to me how much respect she has for me. I worked all day, but part of my brain was focused on what I had to do. I had no proof other than an overheard conversation. I hadn't even noticed anything different in the last 6 months while the affair had lasted. A direct confrontation without proof would be a big risk with little chance of reward. Kelly will deny it. Paul Evans would deny it. Taking any case through the courts would be financial suicide, since every judge, politician, and lawyer in the surrounding counties knew Evans. I would be buried to keep his name clean. I thought about just leaving and starting over somewhere else. It was tempting. But the house would be like an anchor around my neck. Kelly couldn't afford it on her paycheck alone, and we had almost no equity. She'd have to sell it almost immediately to avoid foreclosure, and with the current state of the market, that was unlikely. It would have destroyed both my and her credit history. Being a CPA with a bad credit history is not a good decision when looking for a new position. How can anyone trust you with someone else's money when you clearly don't know how to handle your own? I needed proof before I could do anything about it. I got it, but it came from the most unlikely source. 3 days later, I held on, but I still hadn't found any evidence to back up what I'd heard. Her personal laptop was clean. No secret email accounts were found. No sexy lingerie hidden in a box in the back of her closet. No receipts from places she wasn't authorized to go. Absolutely nothing. Then Kelly called me at work and told me we were invited to a political announcement party at Paul Evans's house on Friday night. I assumed it was his high-profile announcement that he was running for a seat in the U.S. Senate. I had thoughts of a high-profile announcement, but I still had no proof, damn it! We arrived just in time for the big event. Evans had a great mansion near Washington Crossing with a small horse farm. A large tent was set up in the backyard for all the guests. And when we walked in, at the head of the receiving line like a king, stood asshole Paul Evans himself. Being a widower, Evans didn't have a wife to play hostess. But he had apparently enlisted his 21-year-old daughter for the role. She stood next to her father, greeting the guests as if she was born to do so. When it was our turn, Evans smiled broadly at Kelly and exclaimed, "Kelly, you did it! How wonderful!" He kissed my wife chastely on the cheek. Then he turned to me. "Robert, it's good to see you again. I'd be lost without your wife, but I realize I'll have to give her up soon when you start expanding your family." He laughed at his own joke. "Just let me have her when you're done with her, and there will be no hard feelings." There was laughter again. Kelly even blushed a little, and I felt like finishing the smarmy goon off. I took his hint, which he obviously thought had gone over my head. "Who knows what the future will bring," I said in an even, neutral tone. Not hostile, but by no means friendly either. It was the same way I'd reported the results of the audit. Evans blushed slightly, and Kelly elbowed me and muttered something about rudeness. Evans moved smoothly on to the next guest, leaving us alone with his daughter. Kelly was an incredibly attractive woman, but Barbara Evans was a vision. Even in my inner anger, I noticed it. Her dark red hair and brilliant smile made me think of a young Maureen O'Hara. If Kelly looked like a busty ballerina, Barbara looked like she belonged on a pin-up swimsuit calendar next to Kate Upton. She had that combination of good looks, healthy figure, hair and skin that photographers dreamed of, and that so often had to be photoshopped to achieve. Paul Evans had the perfect triple threat political family. He seemed like the perfect wise statesman and family man. Losing his wife to cancer provided him with the perfect wife. She was idolized, and any rival attacking her was ready for career suicide. Barbara was a princess, a prom queen, a Penn State graduate majoring in business and law, a former gymnast, and now a member of the Penn State cheerleading squad. According to Kelly's rumor, Barbara planned to try out for the Eagles cheerleading squad at the next open competition, as she had just turned 21. With a late wife and a smart, beautiful, photogenic daughter, the press will love him on the campaign trail. "Robert," said Barbara excitedly, hugging me tightly. It wasn't a polite hug at a party. It was a full body squeeze. Parts of her body pressed against me with great pleasure. "You look great. No wonder Kelly has been hiding you. You never come to any of our parties." You shouldn't be working so hard. It's not healthy. Somehow she said it all in one breath. In less than a second, my mood went from furious to completely shocked. I made a few polite remarks about how beautiful she looked and was about to leave when it suddenly hit me. First of all, Barbara never said hello to Kelly. And second, what kind of parties? Kelly didn't give me a chance to ask, as she herself rushed over to greet the young woman. Then we had no choice but to give way to the next guests in line. As Kelly and I went to socialize, I wondered what Barbara knew. After buying my wife a drink, I asked, "What kind of parties was Barbara talking about?" Kelly only smiled and snorted contemptuously. She was just teasing, the little prankster. Paul sometimes holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He says he thinks better with a drink in his hand, and at the bar, you never know who might be in the next booth. She's been home a few times when we've met here. Don't tell anyone, but Paul let her drink at home before she was 21. Well, I figured it out. The bastard had sex with my wife right at his house under the guise of team meetings. They could even be real meetings, where Kelly was the last one to leave. Or maybe she left first and came back after everyone else left. That wouldn't allow the legal team to speculate about why Kelly always stayed behind to help the boss clean up the mess. With a dead wife and daughter away at college, he didn't need to find a secluded hotel room. Hence, no record of their meeting. "So, Barbara attends your team meetings?" I asked. Kelly waved the question away. "No, she's been home a few times when classes were canceled. She's just teasing her dad about throwing parties during work hours." She tugged on my arm. "Come on, honey, let's go treat your fiancé." For the next hour, Kelly didn't take a step away from me. We talked to a few of her coworkers, and some of them talked about our plans to have a baby and how sorry they would be to lose Kelly for a while, but how happy they were for Kelly and me. Honestly, I was a little embarrassed. Why did all these people know about our plans? An hour later, Paul Evans called everyone to attention. His daughter stood next to him and smiled. He started by thanking everyone for coming and then began by announcing his big campaign. Everyone was expecting it, but was still excited. I noticed the publisher of the local newspaper and one of his reporters taking notes. I'm sure there will be a lot written about it in tomorrow's paper. I won't bore you with the details of the party. It would have been an enjoyable time if my heart had not been shattered and my brain had not been working at maximum capacity thinking how to prove it all. About 90 minutes after the grand announcement, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, came in and said Paul wanted to meet with his staff. Paul was an elected official, and Margaret was a senior staffer who actually ran the office. Das could come and go every 4 years, but Margaret was a constant. A very tough woman, but at the same time respected in the legal community for her honesty and integrity. An older female lawyer was a big part of the reason Kelly took the position. I liked her a lot. Margaret had been married for over 30 years to an electrician who had kept her in college and now owned a pretty good electrical selection company. These two were devoted to each other. I always thought of them as a model for Kelly and me. "Sorry for stealing your wife away from you, Hogan," Margaret offered. "Paul wants to discuss office organization as soon as he's done campaigning." A moment later, they were both gone. I stepped away from the small cluster of spouses left behind at the meeting and headed to the other side of the large pool across from the patio where the party was being held. There was a wicker swing chair hanging from chains. It was in the shade, so people could see me if they looked closely, but I wouldn't be conspicuous. In other words, it was the perfect place for me to gather my thoughts. I had been sitting for less than 5 minutes when a voice invaded my solitude. "So this is where you're hiding," the voice purred. I looked up as Barbara lowered herself onto the wicker swing next to me. She had arranged herself so that she was sitting facing me without saying a word. Her little black dress skimmed her tanned thighs, clinging to her body, hinting at what was underneath but revealing nothing. Seductive yet innocent at the same time. It spoke volumes about my state of mind that I noted it almost academically. "You look like a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders," she commented. I didn't really feel like talking about this with the daughter of my wife's lover, no matter how sexy she was. "We've been very busy at the office. There are a lot of inspections going on," I said to end the conversation. "Really?" Barbara asked in an interested tone. "I just finished my last accounting course in school." We talked for several classes about the application of forensic accounting to law enforcement. I found it very fascinating. Even in my grief, it surprised me. "Really?" I asked in an incredulous tone. Well, it's not sexy or anything, but it's really detective work to pick out all the right pieces of information from tons of other facts and put them together to get a clear picture. Plus, since some people are trying to hide this information, it gets even more complicated. Most people look at it differently, I admitted. Barbara began to talk at length about what she had learned in the class and why she enjoyed it so much. I have to say that I was impressed. I've had people completing internships at the firm who couldn't have spoken so well about this topic. Focusing on her words helped me dismiss both her looks and, more importantly, the rage boiling inside me. I felt myself sinking into my role as a mentor. It helped me take my mind off the emotional turmoil a bit. "You really enjoyed the class," I remarked. "You seem to have learned the topic very well." Barbara blushed at my praise. For a moment, I saw a sweet girl who was genuinely touched by my praise. I was actually thinking about joining the FBI when I graduated high school. Dad wants me to become a prosecutor or go to work at one of his friend's law firms. I don't think that's what I want to do. You should follow your dreams, not your father's. It was honest advice, not that I was opposed to ruining the jerk's plans. I've done a little work with the FBI when audits turned up something criminal. Sharp people. Before Barbara could answer, Kelly stepped out of the shadows. "That's where you disappeared to." "You didn't do anything inappropriate?" she asked in a teasing tone. Barbara turned to face my wife and smiled radiantly. "We were just talking about Bob's job. We were just discussing it in class. I wanted to get an expert's opinion." "Well, Hogan is him," Kelly said in a proud tone. I looked at one of his audit reports where an employee was embezzling money using his boss's login. Hogan caught on that some of the transfers were happening when the guy was on a business trip, but the login was from the corporate office. Most of us would have stopped when we recognized the boss. Hogan kept digging. I could have gotten a conviction against that employee the first day out of law school. Hogan left the prosecutor's office no chance of success. Kelly looked at me with pride on her face as she told this little story. It embarrassed the hell out of me. How could she be proud of me and claim to love me while she was in a 6-month relationship with her damn boss? A shadow of my confusion must have flashed across my face because Kelly asked, "What's wrong, honey?" "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking about the problem." "Well, that's enough." "It's a party," said Kelly admonishingly. She struggled to catch her breath and said, "Hogan, you'll never be able to guess the opportunity that's come my way. Paul and Margaret want me to take over the administrative work since I plan to go on maternity leave as soon as you finish your job. That way, when I leave, there won't be any work left to do. I'll be working directly for Margaret." My heart sank at the thought of Kelly being away from that bastard Paul. My hopes were dashed after only a second. "I'll have to travel occasionally," Kelly continues. "I'll be delivering important papers to Paul during the campaign, so I won't be involved in his campaign, but I'll get to see some behind-the-scenes action." "It's going to be a lot of fun!" I could feel my heart breaking all over again. I know I've heard Kelly say she plans to end the affair so we can have a baby, but I can easily imagine her rekindling the affair in anticipation of campaign contributions. And if she gets pregnant, who's to say the baby will be mine? The sex is about my height and color. Without a DNA test, that would be very difficult to determine. My anger started to rise, but I held it back. Now was not the time. Barbara started talking to Kelly about her new position and the campaign. Soon they were engrossed in their conversation and I was forgotten. I took this opportunity to pull myself together. After tonight, I would start planning. I needed some way to counter Paul's political power, but honestly, I had no idea how to do it. The answer came to my office 2 days later. "Your appointment is at 4 o'clock, my receptionist called out through the open door. We are no longer allowed to call them receptionists. I looked at my Outlook calendar and didn't see anything booked. Before I could answer, she walked in, Barbara Evans. "Hi, Hogan," she called out as she entered the house. Her long, dark red hair flowed over her shoulders. She was wearing a light sundress, showing off her gorgeous legs and sandals with straps that encircled her legs almost to her knees. Her breasts were modestly covered, no cleavage was visible, but the material pressed against her chest, suggestive. 2 thin straps supported the dress, leaving her arms exposed. I was at a loss for words as I watched her enter. "I hope you don't mind," Barbara began. She closed my office door behind her. I told Mary we had an appointment to discuss my career and how Kelly works for my father. I politely rose from my chair. I'm glad to see you. I was just working on some reports. I gestured for her to take one of the chairs in front of my desk. When she was seated, I sat down. What did you want to talk about? The happy face suddenly disappeared from Barbara's face. I think you know, Bob. I saw it in your face when you were talking to my bastard father. I'm so sorry he destroyed such a good guy. I was stunned. It wasn't what I expected. What are you talking about? I asked cautiously. Barbara grimaced. The fact that the asshole known as my father is having an affair with your wife. I leaned back in my chair at the fact that it was said so bluntly. Did you just find out? Asked Barbara softly. I nodded. I'm sorry. How? When did you find out? I asked. About 3 months ago, Barbara admitted. I don't know when it started, but I found out about it in February. One Friday I went home early and they were having one of their meetings at our house. I had a late lunch with a high school friend, so I just ran in there to drop off my stuff, say hello and leave. Dad asked when I would be home and I said after dinner. It turned out my friend was sick and couldn't make it. I grabbed a bite to eat and went home. I saw my dad and Kelly having sex in our hot tub. I took pictures of them and even made them run naked into the house. There was a foot of snow on the ground. You took pictures of your father having sex? I asked in shock. I also wondered if I could get copies of the pictures. That would be very helpful in the divorce. As if reading my mind, Barbara reached into her bag, pulled out a large envelope and placed it on my desk. Here are pictures of that day and a few others. She paused and grinned. Dad installed a security system in the house. Everything is locked from the outside and there are cameras in several rooms. If you know the website and have a key fob and password, you can get into the house from almost anywhere. There's a thumb drive with videos on it. I was shocked by it. Paul's daughter was handing me everything I would need to divorce and destroy her father. Why? I asked. The sad expression on Barbara's face was replaced by anger. Because, she said in a low voice. I hate that bastard more than you ever could. I answered nothing but waited. After a moment, she spoke. Dad met Mom when she was in college. He was an aspiring attorney assigned to the sex crimes unit in Philadelphia. Mom had come from Ireland to study. Her family was well-to-do but died in the Londonderry bombing. She came here to get away from the turmoil. Her voice took on a soft tone that she had probably adopted from her mother. Mom dated some loser who hit her so hard she ended up in the emergency room. Kelly paused and placed a small book on my desk. It was quite thick and decorated with green lace. I found her diary after she died, and she was something of a submissive. She liked to be led by a strong man. This asshole took it too far and she ended up in the hospital. Dad was assigned the case. They met, the asshole went to jail, and a year later they were married. Dad was always ambitious. He got a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom got a strong man who would protect her. I showed up a few years later. Dad wanted me to do gymnastics. He thought his daughter's performance in the Olympics would do wonders for his political career. You know how most gymnasts' careers end? I shook my head and said, I never thought of that. Barbara smiled. They call it the 3 Bs, tits, asses, and boys. I got the first one. I was told to do cheerleading and be an all-American girl. I didn't mind as I loved performing, but by the time I was 16, I realized I was just a prop for my father's ambitions. Mom knew about it almost from the beginning. Dad had been having affairs almost from the moment they were married. Mom knew and begged him to stop, but she was too weak to do anything about it. She felt trapped. She was a confirmed Catholic, so divorce was out of the question. Barbara paused for a moment, and I let her gather her thoughts. After a moment, she continued. Sometimes I wonder if her poor response to cancer treatment was the result of her unconsciously wanting to die or actively sabotaging her treatment. Either way, I was with her in the hospital when she died. The official story goes that my father was in court seeking a murder charge. He got the doctor to change the time of death. He was actually banging his assistant in her apartment to celebrate. He just displayed the mom as his trophy, and the press loved the story of how they met. Heroic prosecutor goes to rescue a battered woman. Hell, the bastard beat her himself more than once from what I've seen. Why are you telling me all this? I had to ask. Because you don't deserve it, Hogan. My father, he's not a very nice man. After my mom died, he hid his affairs until I left for college. Then he started having meetings at the house. And they aren't just for his work. He also holds meetings for some of the charity groups he's involved in. I know for a fact that he sleeps with 2 other women from these groups. One of the poor women actually thinks it's true love and is going to leave her husband. Kelly thinks so? I asked. I knew I'd heard, but I was still curious. Barbara shook her head and replied, No, she seems to think it's just fun. They say power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Kelly seems to be proof of that. I heard her talking to Daddy about some senator they were meeting and how excited she was when she got back to Doylestown. I flinched at such a rude remark. I even remembered that day. I had come home to a wild woman, and it had been one of the best nights of sex of my life. The cherished memory was now tainted because I knew my wife probably wasn't even thinking about me at that moment. So what do you want? I asked. To her credit, Barbara looked me straight in the eye as she answered. I want you to dissolve your marriage to that cheater. I want my father's career ruined to the point where he'll never be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. I thought about just sending my stuff to the papers or even the other side, but he has too many friends. I think together we can make them pay. Won't it be harder for you to finish school? She shook her red hair again. No, my mom left me her inheritance as a trust fund. I haven't touched it, but if I needed to, I could pay for the rest of my tuition and my MBA, and I'd have a pretty good margin left. If your mom had so much money, why didn't she take you and leave? She could have gone to Ireland wherever your father got to. Barbara wrinkled her nose. As I said, she was raised Irish Catholic. She was taught that divorce was not an option. No matter what happened, Mom held on to her faith to the very end. That's the only thing that makes me think her death was unconscious rather than intentional, since they also consider suicide to be the unpardonable sin. I have to admit I couldn't see anything but the truth in Barbara. She'd said she wanted to destroy her father's career, and my having that information didn't bode well for his ambitions. I couldn't imagine that this could be some kind of trap. If Kelly and Paul wanted to wipe me off the face of the earth, they could do it openly in court. That kind of despicable shit was only appropriate if they were desperate. Like me. A plan began to form in my head. I would need Barbara's help with a few things. It would show me how determined she was to destroy her father. Okay, I agreed. But I don't want to destroy him by releasing those pictures or even calling his name in the divorce. Barbara looked at me in surprise. Why not? She demanded. Her face flushed with passion, and she took a breath to start some kind of speech. I stopped her with a raised hand. I didn't say we wouldn't destroy him, but I don't want to deal with bad press in the form of a cuckolded husband in a political scandal. Instead, I want to destroy what he spent his entire life trying to accomplish. Destroy his power and influence, and I can have a quiet and peaceful divorce that no one will worry about. Barbara looked at me with shock on her face. After a moment, a sly smile appeared on her face. What do you want from me? I smirked. I'm going to do what I do best. Get me his financial records, personal and campaign. They got Capone thanks to tax evasion. Having gotten to know your father, I have no doubt I can find something. And if you don't... What? She asked. I smiled. I can cook some. Over the next 3 days, Barbara and I kept busy. She installed a keystroke logger on my father's personal laptop and home computer. She also made a full backup of his computer's hard drive. We customized their security system so that it would upload the recordings to a cloud space that I know of, which was physically located overseas. How nice of the asshole to bug his own house! For my part, I didn't tap Kelly's cell phone. Thanks to Barbara's evidence, I didn't need anything else. But I did activate the GPS tracker designed for parents watching their kids. It basically used cell towers for location, unless I sent a command to activate the GPS. I just didn't want it to catch me at home when I was busy with work. I faked a groin injury the day after Barbara first came to me. It gave me an excuse not to have sex with my wife. I never thought I would have to make up an excuse not to have sex with my favorite wife. After hearing about the number of Paul's partners, I didn't want to risk even more than I unknowingly did. Besides, I don't think I could have done it without venting my anger. By the way, I made a doctor's appointment to get tested for STDs. Nothing showed up at first, but some of them, like HIV, can take months before they give a positive antibody result. Kelly traveled to the conference in Pittsburgh, annoyed and frustrated to meet Paul one last time. Not surprisingly, she was very excited about the trip. Having left her hanging for the past few days, she was very excited. Some guys might have given her goodbye sex as revenge. My problem was that somewhere inside I still loved her. I could never trust her again, but that didn't mean I didn't still love her. But I also couldn't bear the thought of having sex with her after what I'd learned. It was Thursday morning, and Kelly was waiting with her packed bag for Paul and a junior lawyer from their office who was traveling with them to a conference. I wondered if the young guy knew he was their cover. "So I'll be home Sunday afternoon," Kelly said, coming in behind me and dropping my bag by the front door. I sat at the table with my back to her and sipped my coffee. She wrapped her arms around me and leaned in so that her lips were right next to my ear. "I hope you're feeling better so we can start on the baby," she whispered. Her tone would have brought a dead man back to life, and her scent. It brought me back to more innocent days. It made me want to cry right there. But I managed to hold it together. "I'll ice it so it heals," I assured her. I stroked her arm and kissed her forehead. She moaned. "I wish I didn't have to go to this. It would be so much better to just stay home with you and be naked all weekend." "You can always tell Evans that something more important came up," I said. It just came out. And from the way she looked at me, she heard something in my tone. "What's your problem, Paul?" she asked in an amazed voice. "First you were rude at the party, and now you sound like you hate the man." I forced myself to calm down and shrugged. "Honestly, I've seen too many hotheads like Evans who think they're untouchable and the epitome of power. They're big fish in small ponds. They sell the illusion of power and get people to buy into it. Like that mayor in South Carolina last year. Big powerful. Guy embezzled the city's money by sleeping with 3 married women. Now he's serving 10 years in federal prison, and they're all divorced and publicly humiliated. I have the same feeling about Evans. If he makes it to DC, he'll be banging uncomprehending interns within a week. But eventually his wheels fall off. And his shit's gonna splatter all over the place when it does." Kelly stared at me in shock. She'd heard me rant about those creeps before, but she'd never connected Evans to them before. I probably should have kept my mouth shut, but it felt good to let it out. And even though the marriage was over, I also felt it was only fair to warn Kelly. I still loved her, even if I would never trust her again. "Hogan, that's a terrible thing to say about Paul," protested Kelly. "He's a good man who has done a lot for the people of this county." "He's not like that." I heard an almost pleading tone in her denial. In a timing that could not have been foreseen, we heard the sound of a car horn coming from the house. Paul had arrived. Kelly sighed disappointedly. She gave me a glance that quickly flashed with regret and almost fear. "I'll be home in 4 days," Kelly said in a conciliatory tone. "Then we can talk about it. But be ready, love. We need to have a baby." She then wrapped her arms around me and kissed me passionately. I returned the kiss just as fervently. "Have a good week," she exhaled. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied. She picked up her bag and opened the front door. "Bye, darling," she called over her shoulder. "Goodbye, Kelly," I said. Then I closed the door. 30 minutes later, I left on the train for the city. Barbara and I had an appointment at the FBI. Turns out I didn't have to manufacture any evidence. I would rate Paul Evans's embezzlement skills as moderately intelligent. Barbara and I met at her off-campus apartment to go through the documents she pulled from his computer. Pretty standard procedure. By my calculations, he had about $2 million stashed away in an offshore account. At least that's how much he transferred into it, but I can't be sure it's still there because those records weren't included. Most of this money came from various small donors who wouldn't raise suspicion with the IRS. But why were people from out of state donating to the DA's campaign? I was able to trace a few of them to defendants who had cases dismissed or plea bargains with unusually lenient sentences. It was Barbara who discovered the biggest bomb. Turns out she wasn't the only child. Evans had knocked up 2 other women during this time. One of them was born 3 years before his wife died. The mother was one of his employees at the time. The third child was born 8 months after his wife's death to an 18-year-old female volunteer at the hospital where his wife was treated. Evans transferred $2,000 a month from campaign contributions to each woman as poll research consultants. Barbara nearly destroyed her own apartment in anger. That red hair really is a warning. By the time Kelly and Paul left, we had already figured everything out in Paul's notes. There were still questions, but we didn't have enough resources to get to the information. So I wrote down all the findings and set up a meeting with a senior FBI agent I worked with in the Philadelphia office. Barbara came in to tell him the story we had come up with. Barbara testified that after taking a forensic accounting course, she wanted to look at the actual records. She decided to look at her father's records out of innocent curiosity. When she noticed some oddities, she called me because my wife had worked for her father and knew of my experience. Gary was a seasoned professional. He knew there was more behind it, but we dropped a gift-wrapped present in his lap and he didn't push it. A dirty prosecutor in his own backyard? A dirty prosecutor who just launched a campaign for the U.S. Senate? This career-making case felt like manna from heaven. We caught a cab to Barbara's apartment, since she had classes late, and I walked to the 30th Street station to take the train home. I was already thinking about packing up and leaving when Kelly got home. Gary promised to speed things up and at least subpoena Evans's records by Wednesday. It was unlikely that word of the investigation would get out before then. The bastard will realize how illusory his power is when all the rats abandon his ship. Kelly called me while I was on the train ride home. She said she called early because they were going out to some big dinner, and it would be very late before she got back to her room. I had no doubt she wasn't planning on staying in her room tonight. I made a few vague remarks saying it was fine. She caught my distracted tone and asked what was wrong. I just had a meeting with FBI agents on a case, I replied. I'm on the train, plus the investigation is still ongoing, so I can't talk about it. All of this was the absolute truth. Sounds like you've really been hurt, Kelly said, her tone concerned. Yes, this story is going to be horrible. It will probably make national news when the whole story leaks out. Really? Asked Kelly, looking a little intrigued. Can't you give me a little hint? I couldn't help myself. Criminal politician, bribes, money laundering, sex, adultery, children. Typical summer romance. Anyone I know? I grimaced. I've already said too much. If I say anything else, the Bureau will shut me down. Oh, you're no fun to be with, Kelly pouted. Don't worry, honey, your secret is safe with me. We said goodbye and she left. As I walked into the house, it hit me. My marriage was over. We'd dated and been married. We'd been together for 10 years. I never expected to be single again, but that was what I was facing now. Eventually, I just sat on the couch and waited for the sun to go down. I just sat there and watched. I felt like I was watching my life fade away over the horizon. I just watched. It was many hours after sunset before I stirred again. It was Saturday afternoon when I came out of a fit of self-pity. I'm not saying I didn't deserve an indulgence, but I knew I needed to shake things up. Ironically, I was mowing the lawn again when I saw a BMW convertible pull into my driveway. I stopped the mower, watching Barbara get out of the car. The first thing I saw was her long, pale legs sticking out of the driver's side. She was wearing her sandals again, with the thin laces wrapped around her calves. They always made me think of the ancient Greeks. As she stood, I could see her sculpted legs flexing, which spoke of the strength hidden beneath her firm flesh. In keeping with the Greek trend, she was wearing a pure white dress that looked like a toga, reaching to mid-thigh but with 2 inches of lace at the bottom, allowing a few tantalizing glimpses of her upper thighs. The dress was of a light, silky material that hugged her curves and tended to be translucent. Her firm breasts were supported by a bikini that was visible through the dress. There was nothing on her arms except for light freckles dotting the skin on the top of her arms and shoulders. The dress was slipped over only one shoulder, leaving the other shoulder bare. Her long red hair came down in waves over those same shoulders. However, it was her gray-green eyes and smile that caught my attention as she approached me. I turned off the engine and saluted her. Well, you're looking better than I expected, Barbara said. I half expected to have to pull you out of a bottle or pull you down from a ledge. I snorted. I'd had a lot of thoughts about both options last night. It had to be done, I said. Besides, it distracts me. Not seeing a lawyer? She asked. I shrugged. I did it on Tuesday before they even left. The paperwork will be ready on Monday. I arranged to do an audit at a client in Austin and leave on Tuesday. Usually business trips like this last 3 days, and then I work remotely until the report is done. In this case, I'll be there for all 3 weeks. I shrugged. I guess that's the coward's way out, but I don't want to be here when this whole mess is over. I saw the agreement on Barbara's face. She knew it would draw attention to her too, as the bastard's daughter. I'm glad you're thinking ahead, the redhead said. But I realize that's what you're good at. The smile appeared again. Now I know how to plan too. So here's my plan, Barbara announced. I'm going to help you finish your work here, and then you're going to come to my place. We'll have fun, and you can even ogle me all you want. I have a swimsuit you'll just love. The last part was said in a voice that could have raised even a dead man. I tried to rally. Barbara, I'm still married, I protested. And I don't think I'll be ready for anything else for a while. You need to blow off some steam before you explode, the sexy red-headed girl insisted. Besides, you know the old saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Her gaze was playful, sly, and guileless all at the same time. I couldn't help but laugh. By one of those bizarre coincidences that prove truth is stranger than fiction, we ran into Olivia of all people. After finishing up my yard work, I cleaned up and we headed out for a late lunch at a nice restaurant. I wasn't really looking for revenge sex, but it was nice to get out of the house. And going on a date with a woman as nice as Barbara, and who looked just like Barbara, wouldn't be difficult at all. As I pulled up to the restaurant, I noticed a car parked a little closer to it. It was Oliva's car. I always thought it was a crime to put OBX and Jersey Shore bumper stickers on a Mustang GT. I almost told Barbara to turn around and we'd find another place. But I didn't. Instead, I did something completely out of character. It was all done on a whim. After all my careful planning, something inside me just exploded when I saw Olivia's car parked in that lot. I nonchalantly put my arm around the red-headed beauty and ushered her into the restaurant without further ado. I tipped the host to seat us at a particular table. It was somewhat shaded, but it was in plain view when we returned from the restroom. I seated Barbara facing outward and settled myself next to her. She smiled when I took her hand. "What brought this on?" she asked with a sweet smile. "Not that I'm complaining." I laughed. "Remember when I told you about how I found out about my wife cheating on me?" "Her friend Olivia?" "Well, her car is parked right down the street." Barbara broke into a throaty laugh. "So I'm going to be the other woman?" "Ooh, I can live with that." She leaned forward and planted an incredibly tender kiss on my lips. It wasn't a deep, passionate kiss, but rather a kiss that hinted and promised that there was more to come. A lover's kiss. The food arrived, and I frankly enjoyed myself. The tricks were forgotten while I enjoyed Barbara's company. Her keen sense of humor was killing me. I had never heard accounting sound so dirty before. I happened to glance over and noticed Olivia walk past us. I pointed her out to Barbara. "Oh, that feels good," she giggled. "I've been looking forward to this." With those words, she leaned forward to kiss me. I ran my hand under the table along her leg. The skin of her thighs was so incredibly soft, and underneath hid firm, supple muscles. The touch was electric. I could feel the heat coming from her panties. My hand slid forward on its own to feel the moisture. I was so immersed in the sensation that I was surprised when I heard Olivia yelling at me. "Hogan! What the hell are you doing?" she shouted at me. "Who is this tramp? Hitting on your wife while she's out of town? I thought better of you." I have no doubt the whole restaurant heard her. I let go of Barbara and turned to look at my former friend. "What's your problem, Liv?" "It's just a little carefree sex before Kelly and I settle down and have a baby. And you'll be able to resist it. People are trying to eat." Olivia stared at me like I'd hit her with a dead fish. "What?" she began. "Come on, Liv. Kelly's doing the same thing. I'm sure she's having sex with her boss right now. Has been for months now. So I decided it was only fair that I have sex with the boss's adult daughter." I think Olivia almost had a heart attack. I felt Barbara start to giggle, and I squeezed her lightly to keep her quiet. Of course, I kind of forgot where my hand was, so her giggle turned into a moan of pleasure. "You know about stammered Olivia. I know I'm supposed to be the faithful husband who doesn't realize anything while my wife is running around and being helped by a woman I considered a close friend. Olivia wrinkled at the contempt in my voice. I know Kelly wanted one last taste of weirdness before having a baby. Kind of like that last fling before the wedding. If that was okay for her, what's your problem with me? I had no information that Kelly had any affairs before Paul's asshole, but as the saying goes, once a cheater, always a cheater. I just took note of my suspicion and wondered if Liv would get off balance to confirm it. She was. You know about that too? She sighed. No, but thanks for the confirmation, I replied. Olivia turned pale at that. Go away, Olivia, I said. She turned and disappeared behind the table. A few minutes later, we heard a noise. It was Olivia leaving the restaurant. Well, it was fun while it lasted, Barbara said with a slight chuckle. I really wish she'd been there longer. Her smile made me blush. You know she's probably on the phone with your wife right now, she added. Probably, I agreed. I'm giving her 5 minutes before my phone goes off. However, if she leaves right now, it will be 5 hours to get home from Pittsburgh. That would give us time for dessert and give me enough time to get home and pack. Too bad I won't get to see you in a bikini like you promised. Barbara laughed again. Oh, I guess we can do this another time. She reached up to grab my shirt and pull me closer. You know my semester ends in a week and a half, she whispered in my ear. I've always wanted to see Austin. I barely caught her words before her tongue slipped into my ear. Epilogue. Yeah, that's really the shit hitting the fan. Kelly started calling me 10 minutes after Olivia left the restaurant. I listened to a few of her messages and she was furious that he cheated on her. It almost made me laugh. After an hour of her messages and texts, I blocked her number. I knew she would eventually just call from another phone, but she was driving back from Pittsburgh, so she couldn't just ask to borrow someone's phone on the turnpike. I went home and packed up all my personal belongings, not just the ones for the trip to Austin. I had time. 4 hours after meeting Olivia, I was driving away from my house, probably for the last time. I checked into a hotel near the Philadelphia airport, depositing most of my belongings in a storage unit until I could find a place to stay. I talked to Barbara a few times on the phone. She had gone to a friend's house, as her father was now leaving furious messages on her phone. I rescheduled my flight to Austin for the day and left Monday morning. Kelly had managed to call my phone several times from other numbers. Now it was tearful rants about how I could do this to her, why I ruined her career, etc. 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 Apparently, Olivia's initial outcry got a lot of people's attention. Then someone posted a pretty accurate account on their blog and called Barbara and I players. My comment about Kelly banging Paul was also posted along with the fact that they were together in Pittsburgh over the weekend. This caused quite a stir in county political circles and at the courthouse. For the rest of the week, I avoided most news from Philadelphia. It wasn't until Friday that I received an email that told me what was going on in Doylestown. Surprisingly, it was from Margaret, a senior manager in the DA's office. The elderly attorney was apologizing for everything that had happened. She knew that Paul had been seeing 2 women outside the office, but knew nothing about Kelly's involvement. She also welcomed the fact that I retaliated by using the law against the attorney. According to Margaret, that week in DA Buck's office was eventful. On Monday morning, Paul was in the office trying to deal with the fallout and denying any inappropriate behavior on his part. It's just my daughter rebelling under the influence of a cheating husband, is how he tried to present the story. On Tuesday, Kelly was served with divorce papers on grounds of adultery. Included in the envelope were photos, DVDs, and a letter from me. At Kelly's scream of horror as she read my note, Margaret and 2 others ran into the office. Kelly collapsed in her chair in shock, and Margaret noticed the pictures scattered across the desk. My letter informed Kelly that I wasn't having an affair, but hoped that she now had an idea of how I felt about her and this jerk. I told her I couldn't be married to someone I didn't trust, especially now that I found out she had cheated before. There wasn't much to do at the DA's office on Tuesday. The next day, Margaret was in Paul's office for a meeting when 4 men in suits suddenly walked in. Paul was yelling at them for interrupting an important meeting when one of the men informed Paul that he had been arrested. He was in complete shock as they handcuffed him and led him out of the office, she said. They walked him right through the front door of the courthouse and let reporters through, who were somehow alerted. I owe Gary a few beers for that one. At the end of the letter, Margaret apologized for allowing them to behave in her office. She also asked me to let her know if I needed anything, as I did not deserve this behavior. I'm sure part of her letter had to do with damage control, but mostly I think Margaret was the moral and professional person I always thought she was. Now all my plans for a quiet divorce had gone to hell because of my own stupid, impulsive antics with Olivia at that restaurant. Philadelphia news outlets quickly learned of Paul's arrest and the charges against him. As I told Kelly, the story had all the makings of a summer romance: sex, betrayal, revenge, and too much angst. News outlets loved it, and it was quickly picked up by hungry 24-hour news services. I avoided the worst of it as I was out of town, and they couldn't track me down as I had booked a second hotel room 10 miles away from the one on my itinerary at work. I did check in there, however, and the reporters camped around it trying to catch me. I saw on TV that they were camped out in front of my house. Kelly didn't come out, and they only managed to film my relatives going in and out of the house. Barbara had it the worst, for she was the daughter who turned in her own father. She still had to go to classes and take exams, so for the first few days it was fairly easy for the press to find her. Then the school kicked the reporters off campus because they were disturbing the students. It also helped that 2 women who had children with Paul claimed their own 15 minutes of fame. After wrapping up the last issue, Barbara slipped off campus and headed for the airport. The media was disappointed, but not too surprised when she didn't show up for the graduation ceremony. After a while, the story moved into the secondary news category and stayed there. It heated up when Paul's trial began, but he pleaded guilty to several charges, resulting in a 20-year guest appearance with the federal government. Fortunately, his guilty plea resulted in Barbara and I not being called to testify. And then it all disappeared off their radar, taking Barbara, Kelly, and me with it. Oddly enough, after all the publicity, my divorce went quickly and smoothly. Kelly signed the papers 4 days after receiving them. I received a letter apologizing for what she had done to me and to us. Returning from Pittsburgh, she swore in a rage that she would never forgive me for cheating on her. When she found out that she was really the only one who had cheated, she realized how hypocritical she had been. She accepted my offer of a 50-50th split and asked that at some point, when things weren't so rough, I agree to meet with her so she could apologize in person. She ended by saying that she would always love me and wished me well. I later learned from her mother that she had quit her job and moved to the Midwest to live with her aunt. Catching Paul did wonders for my career. In the press, the FBI gave me full credit for analyzing Paul's records. Because I was hiding from the same press, I was even more thorough in Austin and found not only the embezzler they were looking for, but a second embezzler they had no indication of at the time. My firm promoted me and put me in charge of the white-collar crime team. And yes, some joker labeled the team Hogan's Heroes. But the best part was that they assigned me an assistant, a recent college graduate looking to gain experience in forensic accounting. I've never enjoyed working late so much. And that bikini looked even better on the floor of my hotel room.